Hey, good evening. I'm really happy to have you here. My name is Daniel, I was a professional opera singer and beatboxer, and tonight we got a good one. Hopefully. It's gonna be Dan Vasc singing Nessun Dorma. This one has been so heavily requested, and all I know about him is that, one, he recently reached 1 million subscribers on YouTube, so good for him, and that the genre of which he typically sings is heavy metal. So I don't really have any idea of what his voice sounds like. I don't have any idea of what his technique sounds like or his timbre. I know nothing of the guy, but his name is Dan, so he's got to hold up strong to that Daniel name. But seriously, I'm really excited just to jump into this, and I hope you guys are too. So without any further delay, let's just jump into it.
Nessun dorma, nessun dorma. Nessun dorma, nessun dorma.
Interesting already.
Pura principessa, nella tua fredda stanza, guardi le stelle che tremano d'amore e di speranza.
What a unique take.
Ma il mio mistero è chiuso in me. Il nome mio nessun saprà. No, no, sulla tua
Nice.
quando la luce
Oh,
ed il mio bacio sciogliere il silenzio che ti fa mia.
it's so unique and dynamic.
Ti tramontanti stelle all'alba vincero, vincero.
Oh my god. gosh, man. Oh, wow. Oh my gosh, I've never heard that piece done by a vocalist with that kind of sound quality to his voice. There is a raspiness to it, so the way that he's singing it is not conventional by any standards, and if he tried to audition with that in an opera house, he would be rejected immediately. But man, like, just his world building, and you just see the emotion and the intensity in his face. It's so good. There were many elements of it that he wasn't using classical technique, and I'll go over those things in the analysis. And there were moments of real tension in his body, and you could feel that in some areas. But again, just it was so just dynamic. I'm not specifically referring to volume, just his approach was so vast. Oh my gosh. Like I just mentioned, it's not anything that's traditional, and he didn't approach it traditionally. He approached it in a way that's authentically him, which I really, really love, especially if you're not auditioning for, you know, the opera. You're posting a video of you, and in your own style, in your own voice, in your own everything, just committing to your take on a famous classical piece. And personally, I think he really did this song justice. I really enjoyed listening to that. Again, even though it's not conventional, and even though there are things that I'm going to nitpick about it, oh dude, just that performance was so stellar. And I'm so excited just to pick it apart a little bit, because while there are some criticisms I definitely have praises to award him as well. So let's just jump into those.
Nessun Dorma.
So the first thing is, when singing Italian, you would always flip your R's. If there are two R's in a row in a word, that's when you would roll the R's. So when he's rolling the R's here on Dorma, the word is Dorma, not Dorma. And it is important in the context of the language to not roll the R in that particular instance. That being said, the way it was executed was very good. The R roll was very consistent and sounded lovely. It's just not correct in terms of the language. I really like that open at the very beginning. He's not doing ne, open epsilon. Nessun Dorma. Very open. Yeah, and he just executed that very, very well. And moving on.
Nessun Dorma.
So, another thing, just regarding his timbre, it is very raspy, and it is very interesting hearing this kind of raspy quality in classical music. It's just not something I hear a lot of, so I really love this particular style and his voice on it. That being said, his voice is a little breathy, and what I mean by breathy isn't to say that you can audibly hear escaped breath, but there's breath that he's using that isn't being vocalized. And what I mean by that is, when you breathe with your diaphragm, and your diaphragm expands outward, and then that comes into your chest to resonate. It passes through your larynx and out through your mask. So the idea of it resonating in your chest is to utilize all of that breath and resonate it. Nessun Dorma. And if you're going to taper it, ma. That way, it's constantly resonating, but you're not really allowing any of that breath to go unvocalized. And in the style of heavy metal music, there's a lot of breath that comes out that isn't vocalized. So it's very natural for him to be doing that. And keep in mind, all of my critiques are from a classical perspective. Everything he's doing here is what he wants to do for his music, and this music video can be his masterpiece for all I know, and rightfully so. I think he did an amazing job with it. So just keep in mind that all of my criticisms are coming from a classical perspective, not criticizing him directly in the way that he chose to approach this piece. So with that being said, also, he's moving his mandible too much, his lower jaw. When I say too much, I don't mean to say that, oh, well, he needs to create this open space with the words. Of course he does. But that being said, if you exasperate it too much, that can cause a lot of jaw tension. And with jaw tension, that can cause your sound quality to suffer, unfortunately. And you might be wondering, well, how does the sound suffer if the sound is generated inside of you and jaw tension is a very superficial layer? And the reason is because the moment there's any tension in your body, especially if it's directly connected with where your sound is traveling out from, if you have tension in your legs, that can affect your voice, because when you breathe, yes, you're breathing and expanding your diaphragm, but subconsciously the image is that you're absorbing air from the ground, it's going through your feet and energizing your legs and then expanding your diaphragm. Your entire body is completely invigorated with energy every time you take a breath. And that's how you get the breath to spin. That's how the momentum is generated. So if you have tension in key areas, it's a restriction in those areas. Even if it's not a restriction in your diaphragm or your chest or your larynx, it can still affect the sound quality. So if you have jaw tension, it can ultimately cause the sound to suffer, even ever so slightly. I'm going to do two examples. The first example is going to be with jaw tension, and the second example is going to be without jaw tension, and I hope you guys can find the difference in that. So the first one with jaw tension. Nessun Dorma. Without jaw tension. Nessun Dorma. The sound is more rounded without the tension, and the breath flows considerably easier, at least for me. It might be more difficult to hear it, but in my body I can feel it flowing considerably easier. So just to have that kind of awareness and that kind of training is very useful. So moving on.
Nessun Dorma.
And something else that I just noticed in that too, I also saw some tongue tension. The way he was moving his tongue. Typically, when you sing this kind of piece, the only time your tongue should be moving is to create consonants. When it's not creating a consonant, the vowel should be first and foremost coming through. And when the vowel is happening, your tongue is resting in your mandible. It is relaxed, and it's not coming up to restrict that airflow. It's not doing other things to prep for the following notes or following words. It is completely relaxed. And if you look at performances by Pavarotti or Domingo or Carreras, you'll see every single one of them have their tongue just resting. Even though when they sing and they're projecting and their mouths are very far open, it's still very relaxed. Even though it's big, their jaw is relaxed, their tongue is relaxed, everything is coming through, flowing beautifully. So when you have a little bit of that tongue tension, you'll have a similar effect to jaw tension where it can just ultimately restrict your airflow. Just something to keep in mind. I love how tender he is here. Again, he's not fully vocalizing it, so it is coming out a little bit more breathy than I would have liked it. In comparison to you feel more of that breath coming in on the second, but if you vocalize it, you can still keep it tender, but still have a lot of that support and strength needed to keep that vibrato spinning, and to make sure that you're not drying out your larynx or your vocal cords with unvocalized breath. But that being said, his approach here and his consistency in his vibrato, absolutely stellar. If you do not have classical training, keeping that consistency in your vibrato, especially in mezzo piano or medium soft to piano soft tones, dynamics, volumes, is just so difficult. So much credit to him for being able to execute something extraordinarily challenging in classical music to such a high degree. You know, really great stuff here. I love the way he attacked in that sentence. Yeah, love that. Yeah, that was a nice open too. So good, dude. And so it's just so clean, and it's so open, and it's rounded and bright, yet yeah, it was really well executed. I really liked that. So in that sequence there, it felt so note to note. And when you're doing musical cadences, you want the music to flow. And I understand that sometimes there are artistic choices to separate them to add just a tremendous amount of emphasis on either a specific message that you're saying with the text. But in this particular example, I would have preferred to have it feel much more connected instead of bum, 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 bum. So let's just listen to that again. Yeah, and that that was so well done. The R was flipped beautifully. The dynamic was decrescendoed ever so slightly, but just that full sound, that full vocalized sound just came through chef's kiss beautifully. Yeah. Okay, so starting that cadence was not great. And what I mean by that is you just go from this very powerful vocalized sound into this unvocalized whisper approach. And again, for what it is that he's trying to achieve here with his own style, if that's exactly what his intention is, he executed it brilliantly. And kudos to him if that's what he ultimately wanted for that particular sound. I'm not judging his sound or his style or his genre by any means. I love this type of music. From that classical perspective, you need to vocalize it. If you're going to approach something tenderly, it must be vocalized. Let's listen to that again. And it just needs to flow and be vocalized. If you're going to do it even more quietly, it still needs to be vocalized. Just creating that whisper tone is going to dry out your vocal cords very, very quickly. But he might have his own technique to not have them dry out, and if he was my classical voice student, this is the critique that I'm giving. But he's not. He is a metal singer, and he's doing a freaking awesome job tackling this piece. And I love how he's performing it. Yeah, and that tenderness was a very good choice there to come in on that. Something else that I noticed too is he held the N in speranza. So if you were to hold a consonant or roll it in the case of the R's, it needs to be a double consonant. And even then, I wouldn't hold it as long as he did. Speranza. Just allowing that N to be carried through, but focusing on the vowel. The vowel is the most pure sound you're going to have in any given word. And in Italian, vowels are everywhere. So just to keep that flow going and focusing on those vowels instead of closing too early or focusing on the crispness of other consonants, I find to be very important. But speaking of crispness, his diction is superb. superb. Better than most classical vocalists, actually. I find often many classical vocalists kind of cheat on consonants at times, depending on the language, of course, but oftentimes in German pieces especially, I'll hear people try to cheat their way out of creating uncomfortable sounds. Like ich, it's E, and then breath coming out of it. Ich, ich, which is I in German. So if you were to sing ich, like ich grolle nicht, you would do ich groll, not ich groll. A lot of vocalists don't want to create that kind of air, unvocalized air flowing out of their breath, but that's the language. That's what you have to do. So you structure it in the way that flows, like ich grolle nicht, and you allow that to be a part of the word because it is the word. It's not just E. You structure it in with the cadence. So I think that that's really important as well, especially in the way that Dan is tackling this. When he does that he, you feel it in your chest. He. Like, let's listen to that again. And he's just dropping so much weight on it. I wouldn't advise that because that can very, very easily cause the pitch itself to become flat, even by quarter tones. So a general idea, especially for male singers, is the deeper you go, the higher you want to feel. And the higher you go, the more grounded you want to feel. You want to have a good sense of balance when you're performing. A very common stereotype for tenors is before they sing their high note, a stereotype is that they'll stomp and then sing the note. And that stomp is supposed to be reflective of them truly grounding themselves in the earth and feeling as much support as possible to execute the note without cracking. Where, on the contrary, oftentimes with basses or baritones, when they have to sing low notes, you'll often see them raise their eyebrows and go, fa. And it looks really silly, but if I were to just sink into the earth and try to feel that support, that fo is going to sound a little different, such as fo. Like, oh my gosh, it doesn't even feel good. Like, and that's my point though. Even if it sounds the same to the audience, if the artist doesn't feel it in their body, it can completely screw up personal sensations, their personal momentum, and that can actually cause the rest of the song to suffer, even though in the moment it might not sound like it. So to have a good sense of balance as to where you are in your own body is critical when singing. So when you just sink into a note, especially if it's starting a cadence and it's a powerful note, I would advise to not just sink into it, but rather approach it in the same way where it's very strong and powerful, but you approach it dead center in that middle of the pitch, and you keep that heaven and earth connection, that balance between your grounded support and this little string that's coming through the crown of your head, pulling you upward. It's creating that sense of completeness in your own body that allows you to just consistently be in the center of the pitch without losing any of that momentum. And yeah. So something that I actually like about this that I don't see a lot of classical vocalists do. His lips are outward. That's actually pretty great. And some of you might be asking, well, we were just talking about tension. What about lip tension? You're absolutely right. The way you structure your lips to form vowels and sounds is imperative to the way that it is executed. If the sole purpose of a note is to project it, you want to make sure that your mouth position is not only in the shape of the vowel, but in the shape of being able to project it. His mouth is forming a cone that allows the air to not only resonate inside of his mask, but also allows it to funnel out broadly, not targeted and piercing people, but it's very broad. It encompasses the entire theater, and that is excellent. And on top of that, again, his vowels are very, very good. His consonants are very, very good. And the way that he's approaching each of them is very, very good. So just what he's doing right here is excellent. And his vibrato is so amazing here too. Like, I can listen to this forever. And just the way that he was, like, it did feel, again, a little choppy in that, but oh my gosh, it felt more connected than before. It feels like he was more penning it, and it was so good. So, quando. More of an open O, I would have preferred, instead of O. But very, very minor difference. Luce. In comparison to Luce. Like, let's listen to that again. Yeah. Connected a little bit more. Yeah, and I already talked about this, but this is another example of just having a little bit more of that breath come through that isn't being vocalized. If you're gonna be tender in a specific cadence, or even just words, you can still make it tender and very impactful, but still keep it vocalized. And that's a very difficult technique to master, so I'm not blaming or faulting him by any means. It's just something to be cognizant of and to keep in mind as you're practicing and training. That was a really nice decrescendo there. Again, would have preferred to have it more vocalized, but the way he tapered that was very well executed. Very difficult for any vocalist to do. So, really good stuff there. Just the way that he approaches more of his higher register is so good, dude. Again, he's being very choppy here. It's not really connecting as much as I want it to, but just his approach into his upper register, it's so good. And it's so pure and robust. I love it. So he did Famia. And I'm going to use some IPA, which is the International Phonetic Alphabet here. So on Famia, he did at the very end, which is a schwa sound, or it looks like an upside down E, essentially. Lowercase e in English. And that creates the UH sound, And on this particular word, you want more of an open ah. Famia. Instead of Famia. Like, let's listen to that again. Yeah. And again, Italian has a lot of very open, very bright vowels. And some dark vowels, obviously, as well. But you want these vowels to be as pure as possible. And to have us is so much more rare than having an open ah in a sound. So just something to keep in mind when you're practicing this type of music. I just love his intensity here. It's so good. I'm just so wrapped by him. Like, you can feel this. And this is something I love about heavy metal music, is that when the artist is performing, you feel their energy. Their energy is just so dominating and palpable and imperious in some ways that it just is so overwhelming, and you just feel this energy oozing off of them. And the fact that they're just not completely enervated at the end of it is beyond me. Like, oh my gosh, it's just... They're so good at showcasing the emotions that they need to express in the music, and it's just so masterful here. Especially on moments of downtime where you're not singing, it's that much more important to keep your audience engaged on you and to have them just feed off of your energy if they're not feeding off of your voice. Such good performance technique he's doing here. Although he does have some face tension here, which I would advise against. Like, you can see that that stank face, but it doesn't feel very tight. It still does feel relaxed, but there is tension in it, and you can tell. Yeah, and the head movement is a little too forceful and reflective of that tension. Just the way he approaches those is, like, yeah, again, choppy, but oh my gosh, just getting into his upper register is so nice. I can listen to that all day. Just I don't mean to laugh at it. It's just comical to me that it's just so consistently choppy throughout all of it. Like, please keep in mind, I've heard this song hundreds of times, and I've heard it done in very minorly different, unique ways, but just to solely chop it up is just something that I haven't heard before. I haven't heard any artist that performed this piece just separated as much as he is. And it's just so striking to me, which is why I'm laughing at it. But it's not laughing as in it's haha funny, but it's more just like it's just so bizarre to me that just my initial reaction to it is laughter. But no, it again, it sounds amazing. It's just, yeah, it's just so striking. Yeah, and he's doing something that I personally very much struggle with when singing, which is the furrow of the eyebrows. That causes so much facial tension and can really affect the sound of your voice, especially on upper notes. And it's so tough because it's very easy to tell that there's a lot of tension in his body, and the way he's executing a lot of the notes that are either not being fully vocalized or just coming out very forcefully. But ultimately, it just comes down to the sound and the quality of the sound. And the quality of the sound is good. It is very solid, very powerful, very strong, and well supported. And ultimately, as long as the voice is well supported and you're not just breathing constantly through your chest, but rather through your diaphragm, I think that's the most important thing. And he's executing that very well. Something sounded a little weird in that last note. Let's listen to it again. He might have tried to do a little trill where he went up and down again, but it wasn't confident, or it didn't sound confident to me. So I can only assume that it was just not enough support and direct targeted sound through his mask that caused the sound to waver outside of his natural vibrato. Like, listen really closely again. Yeah. There's just something there that doesn't feel as supported as the rest of the note did. That cutoff, chef's kiss. So many vocalists, and this drives me nuts about classical singers and just their monstrous egos. Obviously not all of them, but some of them, where they hold a note and they love that note so much that they refuse to let it go even after the note is finished in the music. So to have a really clean cutoff, perfect, amazing. Yes, Dan. Oh my gosh. I'm gonna listen to that cutoff again. That's how good it was. And just that intensity again. Stella was beautiful. And if you notice that on that too, his tongue was resting in his mandible. Let's listen to that again. Yeah, there. He has tongue tension there, and you can see his tongue kind of moving back and forth from the back of his tongue near his uvula. And for those who don't know, your tongue actually begins or ends, I guess, whatever, right here. So to cause the middle of your tongue to kind of move back and forth in the center of your mouth, that is affecting how the air travels through your mask, which is creating a more piercing sound than the more robust sound we know he's capable of because he's already executed it throughout the piece. But again, beautiful ending note, very powerful, very strong, very robust, very nice, very well executed, and I love the sound, regardless of the tension. And that cut off too. It was so nice. He did such a great job. If I was not a professional musician and I have not been exposed to that piece my entire life and I didn't know anything about singing in Italian, and also for those that don't know, singing in a language versus speaking in a language are two very different things. I'm a native English speaker, yet I find singing in English to be one of the more challenging languages for me to sing in. I don't mind taking the time to translate pieces and to structure IPA on every single word within a piece. Yeah, it's time consuming, but it's not the worst thing in the world. But the flow of the language is so important, and English is so challenging, especially with all of the diphthongs. So, plus we just have a lot of really awkward sounds. But that being said, I think just removing myself from my musical classical background, I'm completely dazzled by Dan. His voice is so big, and to hear any really powerful and just robust voice is always going to be dazzling, regardless of tension or whatever. So, first and foremost, I love the sound quality of his voice. It is so nice. And the intensity that he has that just radiates off of him just incandescently. It's so palpable, and it just wraps me. Watching him perform, I was just completely captivated from the first moment to the end. And Dan, if you're watching this, man, that performance was so stellar. All of my critiques are done through a classical lens as someone who's just heard the piece a million times and has a more in-depth understanding of it and of Italian diction and the way that Italian is typically sung classically. But man, dude, the way that you approach this in your own style, in your own transitioning from this heavy metal genre into something that is commonly perceived to be the antithesis of that, dude, really stellar work, brother. Like, that was chef's kiss. Honestly, loved it, man, loved it. Thank y'all so much for watching this video. If you liked it, please like, comment, and subscribe. And if you didn't like it, please leave a dislike and let me know why in the comments. I do read all of the comments, even if I might not heart or reply to all of them, so please just know that your comments do not go unnoticed, and I do take them into further consideration as I make future videos. My Patreon is still a few weeks away from being fully developed, and I really appreciate your patience on that. I recently finished the skeleton of it, and now it's just really busting out as much content as I can on top of my already busy schedule. So I really appreciate your patience in that regard. For those of you who have asked to want to support me, that really does mean a lot, and I'm working really hard to try to make this exceptional for all of you. My live streams are Thursdays at 1 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, and there we just talk about ideas, philosophy, interests, psychology. So pretty much anything that you guys want to ask me, I'm going to be there for you. So please join me at 1 p.m. Pacific Standard Time if you're interested in that. That is subject to change, but right now that is what it is. I deeply appreciate all of you being here. It really does mean a lot to me, and I can't wait to see all of you in the next video. Have a great rest of your evening, everyone.